we talked to Racing Pixel with Vesey because he's a Democrat. I says, because he said, oh, Greg, Vesey was gracious. He came over. I says, you know what you call a gracious loser? He said, what, a loser? I said, I don't know. I'm going to lose. I'm going down on my team.
Well,
like 800. But so then here's where you are. Is he thinking about taking a second run?
Probably, I'm hearing him.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to another edition of the Volpe Basel Report. I'm your co-host, Dominic Volpe, here with Andy.
Back from Florida.
Back from Florida again. Will you stop telling those people that? Because I haven't gone to Florida in 2.5 years. And you're telling me I'm sitting on a beach with freaking Mai Tais and Corona beers for crying out loud.
People are coming into his store and ask him how Florida was, which I enjoy. We have to say hello to our number one fan.
Marianne McCara, our number one and only.
Well, she is such a good fan. She set up a separate Twitter account. Now she's got 2 of them, so she can share our stuff under 2 names.
Oh, no kidding.
I'm not kidding. Not kidding. That's a devoted fan. Now, we have a first-time guest.
Yes.
I only met him on election night in Yorktown. And apparently he's been following me on Twitter, and I follow him. He says I'm the only one that shares his stuff. But he is our assembly from District 94, Kevin Byrne. Pleasure to meet you.
Andy.
Thank you for coming in.
And what areas does that encompass pretty much?
You can
Sure. Yorktown and Somers in northern Westchester, and then much of Putnam County, including Putnam Valley, Carmel, Southeast, which includes the village of Brewster, and the town of Patterson.
So he doesn't want to talk about it, but that's the former Ball Cats district.
And of course, we got former Yorktown supervisor Michael Grace, who has now been promoted to political commentator.
Yes, that actually is a promotion.
Yes,
right out of public service.
Well, but the reality is Mike's take on politics and the people around is very honest. And people that have watched the show and that I drive in the car happen to like his way of looking at things. They just said it's very direct and there's no BS in him. Whether you agree with him or not, they know he's speaking what he thinks.
That's why I'm not in politics anymore.
I know it doesn't help to do that.
He's great because he's the anti-Darren Rigger.
No.
No. In the same mold that he's from one side and he's the other spectrum.
No, Darren's likable.
No. So is Michael. And you call him your friend?
No, I got to tell you. We watched the race Tuesday night.
Yeah.
This district was a 1 for the legislator,
Catalina's right.
Yes.
District 1. Now, here's a district that was gerrymandered red.
It's a super red district.
This is what when I always say in New York, if you could vote for roadkill if it has a D next to its name. In District 1, roadkill could win if it had an R. And Frank managed to lose that district. I don't think that district has been Democrat in my entire life.
No, it hasn't.
How is it so hard? I don't understand that. I my impression.
Because they took the D's and put them in 9.
Right. They made Borges.
District.
Right.
Yes.
Because that district had my best Yorktown districts in it.
Right. Correct. That was the compromise between, at that time, Testa and Borgia. What they did is they made the Borgia district a super Dem district, and they made this a super Republican district. You're the Republican.
Yeah, but they also horse traded with Kaplowitz.
Right,
because Kaplowitz picked up, we had Jefferson Valley.
Right.
And then he ended up going down into Newcastle.
Correct.
Right.
So that made that a bit.
Yeah. It was a trifecta.
Yeah. Interesting, because if you look at the vote tallies in all the legislative districts, my district polled over 14,000 votes. But all the other ones were down. The highest next was 12, and then some of them were 10. So I don't know how it is that my district ended up polling the most votes. I don't know if that's just Newcastle or is it just.
It was your charm.
Generating a lot of.
It was your charm, yes.
You should be able to break that down.
But the fact is, Frank had a unique gift of accumulating enemies. that where his friends didn't hate him. It's, he didn't have an enemy actually, but his friends didn't like him. And it just came, because you hear in back circles. I mean, there were Republicans that just said, "Ain't happening. We're not going to support him, and we're not going to help him."
Well,
think
wasn't
that's
there also
unfortunate,
wasn't there
maybe
also the fact that the former county legislator actually was working against him too?
Well, that's what we heard. I mean, but he didn't help him.
Yeah, he didn't help him.
I don't think there's any photos of those two in the same
Well,
photo.
it's interesting. Towards the latter days of my campaign, when I was talking, especially down in Newcastle, it's a lot of people in Yorktown know me. Someone was kind of knew me, but Newcastle was very foreign territory for me in some respects. But I tell them, I'm running for county legislators, a 17-member board, which 14 are Democrats, and there was only
Three.
five contested.
Yeah. Five contested. Right.
races.
Correct.
I think, and that was it. And if the Republicans lost all of them, you'd end up having pretty much no Republican or minority voice on the county board, which is exactly what happened.
You got one now.
You got Cusio, that's it. And Cusio and Tubio.
So what is it now? It's 15-2 then, is what it is right now?
Yeah. So it's
Well, they already had the supermajority at 13, I think. Right?
Yeah.
So that's already at that point. It's already
So they netted +1
They
in
net-
the
yeah.
one where what John Testa had.
two.
Now you're in the assembly, and then you
talk
have
about odds.
I mean,
I don't know. Westchester County is giving me a run for their money. I'm outnumbered 2-1. I think you're outnumbered worse than Westchester County.
no, but when I went out,
yeah.
but you know what it's like to be a eunuch.
Yes. It's
And-
going somewhere.
Told you first time. But anyway, but you know what? But still, I think there's enough assembly members that they still need somebody in the Republican side if they wanted to override a veto, that they couldn't just, without a Republican help.
Actually, no.
I thought-
So you need. You're right in that you need a 2/3 majority to override a veto. And I think back in 2010 we hit that threshold, and then there was this thing called a census, and then there was this thing called gerrymandering, and then poof, we went back down to like 46. So now we're at like 44. So the Assembly Republican Conference, I'm fortunate to work under with our leader Brian Kolb, who does a magnificent job. But unfortunately, it seems every couple of years we keep gaining traction, we keep building it, and then gerrymandering, and we go back down. And we go
I
up,
wish the
and back down.
Senate leadership had the balls that Kolb had. I don't think they would have lost the Senate. But between Bruno and then what's his name afterwards that's going
Dean
to jail?
Skelos?
Yes, Skelos. They were so eager to kiss Democrat ass, where Kolb is actually a Republican.
Oh yeah.
And I think if he was the head of the Republicans in the Senate, I don't think they would have lost the majority. I really don't.
We've had this. You and I have had this discussion. We've had it quite often about this diluting of the Republican brand because it tries to be a we call Rhino or actually Democrat light almost.
Democrat light, yeah.
And the thing is, and I think it's for years, I guess the Republicans thought that compromising some of their basic tenets was good politics to try to draw in the left or the center left under their tent. And what's it proved to have done? Nothing. It just
kills your brand.
Decimated the Republican Party.
Actually, that just sparked the thing. So looking back now, let's say, you've only been there 2 years?
I'm in my third year. Second term.
Third year. Okay, so.
Are you running again?
He hasn't announced yet, but I
he's gonna
likely
do it
will
on
be
our
running
show.
again next year. Yes.
So, see,
You got the
But
big
looking, so looking back though, like what we just spoke about, so then has the gerrymandering actually helped you or hurt you? In other words,
My district?
in order no, just let's say statewide and just in general, because the way I've been told, the Senate has to pass off on that when they do the gerrymandering.
2/3 majority.
Two-thirds majority has to agree to it. In a sense, it's almost like you thought you were protecting yourself, or let's say the Republican or Democrats, but in the end, the Democrats seem to be gaining on every one of these elections. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Is it just because the amount
Senate
of
Republicans weren't good at gerrymandering?
No,
I would
no,
say
no.
that is exactly what it is. They got greedy. In my opinion, they actually added another Senate seat after the gerrymandering.
Right.
They
I
added a
remember.
whole new seat. And they thought, I think that was actually George Louder, our county executive in Westchester County. They drew that seat thinking that they could pick that seat up as a Republican seat.
Right.
And they never got it. I
Yeah.
think they got a little greedy.
And then what happens is that every
It's
successive race,
60 though, right? It's just
No, it's
61?
63.
Three.
because every successive race afterwards,
62.
you just don't know what the impact is, and it seems like it's getting worse and worse and worse and not getting better and better. It's almost like it's saying you're better off just leaving things 50-50 and let the better candidate win instead of trying to do this gerrymandering, because it doesn't seem to be the way to get ahead. You know what I mean?
Well,
It's
there
like,
is a way that you can.
you know, I'll
look
give
at-
you one on a Democratic ticket. We had a guy named Bill Burton who was right here down in the Croton, which was Borges district.
Rich Rogers, yeah.
The committee at that time said that they were going to take away some from County 1 in order to give it to him. And I'm like, look, this guy's a dinosaur. Hey, what are you trying to save here? In the end, they almost lost that seat. And they gave him everything under the sun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm just flipping it to your side now to say, if the Senate is majority Republican, correct?
Not
No.
anymore.
Not anymore. It already flipped.
And actually, they're almost in a similar situation as I am. They're 2 or 3 seats away from being in the super minority. Right
Oh, really?
Because when they lost in 2018, they lost big. I think they lost about 8 seats.
Eight seats went down,
It
8
switched
seats
the other
went
way. But what I would say is,
Yeah,
to your
'cause
point
they-
about the gerrymandering, a lot of these
independent
losses,
IDC.
it's about a bigger story politically and about New York City moving up.
Right.
There's a lot of different
Correct.
reasons.
Right.
I wouldn't pinpoint it just on gerrymandering. But I think the simple way to do it is if you're going to draw lines, it should be based on geography and population and based on a simple formula. And that's the fairest way to do it. The Assembly has actually put forth rules to try to prevent people from cutting towns apart unless you absolutely have to. I think the best way to do it is have a strict formula.
You mean like the county
Yeah,
cut
because-
Yorktown?
Like for example, in County 1, it used to be Peekskill, then it became Peekskill and a little piece of Cortland. Then a year later, it became another 6 to. Then Yorktown, they had 1. Then it became 2. Then it became 4. Now it's 11. And it's like, so they have 2 different, they say, oh, now you have 2 county legislators representing you instead of 1. 1 can't do anything. What the hell, what are you going to do with 2?
But I can tell you what happens, what's happening when you talk about the increase in the Democrat vote. If you look at Democrats as a cancer that kills everything it touches.
Right.
They're in New York City, and they don't like what's going on there, so they move to the suburbs.
Right.
Problem is, they bring that cancer with them and start voting. I'm getting out of New York City because the taxes are too high and they're trampling on my rights.
Yeah.
Then you move to Yonkers. Well, I'm going to vote Democrats because my taxes aren't high enough and I still have rights, so we're going to vote. Then I'm going to move up into Chappaqua. Then let's move up into Yorktown and let's move into Peekskill and let's kill them.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. The cancer spreads, and right now in New York, it is metastasized.
Well, I think the Republicans have to, stop. They have to get their ideas out there, and they haven't. They're not successful in doing it. I mean, next year's campaign should have started today. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that forget about necessarily. The way they recruit candidates is kind of odd too. I mean, they have to bring back that. Right now, there is a real ideological war going on. Everybody says, "Oh, I wish it could be like when Reagan and O'Neill were around."
O'Neill.
Yep. But you know what it was?
They hated each other.
No,
That's
they
such a
hated
myth. That is a
No,
myth.
stop
But you know
making
what?
up a story.
No,
But
it's not. No, it's a myth.
What they had in common, though, that a lot of their core values were the same. It may execution and maybe process, but they still had some very deep core beliefs. And right now, that doesn't exist. It really doesn't exist at all. The belief systems on the left and the right are very much different.
They're polarized.
Yes,
Yes.
and you can't. And it's not Trump. Trump is just an easy. The Democrats take him as an easy target because if you take out they all the character flaws they think Trump has. Pence doesn't have any of them, but they hate Pence more than they hate Trump. And so it's just the personality makes him an supposed easy target. And ideological rift is significant. And the thing is that Republicans are not good at getting the ideological.
Because they don't believe in it.
Are you
Well, I can tell you, Andy, I respect the heck out of you. I wouldn't label anyone within one party as a cancer. It's a little bit stronger language than I would use.
Name me one Democrat that has improved what he touched.
Well, you're talking about elected officials. I mean, I have plenty of friends and family that are
I'm
Democrats.
talking about.
But I know what you're saying. The
They're voting.
I would say it's big government versus limited government.
Okay,
More
okay.
freedom
I'll tell
versus-
you what. We'll call the elected official the cancer, and we will call the Democrat voter the cigarette that causes the cancer.
I do see that the ideology down in New York City has
I
spread
think I
up
just
here.
embarrassed him.
No, he didn't embarrass me. It's fine. I know. I get your point. I absolutely get your point because it is spreading up here, and I think it's this idea that trickles down from the national debate.
Right.
You know, whether you're talking about Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders about Medicare for all, which we talked a little about it earlier before the show. I think it's a misnomer. Single payer system is not fair to label it as a Medicare for all. And, you know, we're facing that challenge right here in New York.
Yeah, but tell them why you said it's not a Medicare for all. You
because
actually
it's-
gave a reason.
Yeah, because in Medicare you actually have options that you can choose from, and in single payer, that's the only game in town. And why do we know about this even more? As a state assemblyman, I don't make a habit of chiming in on national issues or Congress or people running for president, but we have a single payer proposal that they are fighting to push every single year, right? We had public hearings. I got one in Kingston in a couple of weeks. I was down in the Bronx at a public hearing. I was in Albany earlier this year for the New York Health Act. They try to build this as the proposal that's going to solve all of our healthcare problems. It's like going to be this utopia that everyone's going to have health care. They don't think about the fact that it's going to cost over $250 billion and our state budget's only $175 billion, which is a lot, by the way. It's more than almost any other state in the country. They don't talk about how our government, our Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement rates compared to insurance reimbursement rates are significantly lower. So if you take away private health insurance, it's going to impact the health care industry.
So you mean there's already a shortfall of $75 billion based on what they project and how much money you
Well,
have in the
it's
budget?
so the $250 billion. To be fair and completely open on this, some of that money that they're lumping into $250 billion is Medicare dollars and Medicaid dollars. So they're going to repurpose that. So anything that was being spent on Medicare will be now rolled into this single payer proposal.
Right.
But you're going to kill over 100,000 jobs. People in the health insurance industry, people working claims, and anyone that has their health insurance, likes it, and wants to keep it, you're going to lose it. Right. It's going to be replaced with this new Albany Care proposal, right? That's taxpayer funded, and you're going to lose the health insurance that if you're a union worker, guess what? That benefit that your union collectively bargained for, you just lost it.
It's gone.
And you're getting something else now that's untested. They may say it's better. I don't trust the government to do something better than in the private sector. And guess what? It's going to be replaced with a payroll tax and a record high income tax hike.
Well, wait a
And you're gonna have
second,
tax rates like
but
crazy.
there's something I think you're forgetting to mention, because we're both on the same Twitter accounts.
Sure.
Okay? No. And I don't know if you follow Decker, from that used to work for the Post.
No, I maybe I do. Fred?
Fred.
Yes, a little bit.
Right,
I'm not
and-
big on Twitter. That's why.
I know, but you should follow him. I mean, because
Okay.
you should be, because he's been talking about how the governor has been screwing with the budget by delaying the Medicaid payments. We can't afford to pay our
Yes.
Medicaid, which is state, obligation now. Because if he paid it now, then it would throw the budget out of whack.
Yeah,
But I'm saying now they want to do Medicaid for everybody.
And-
Medicaid's only a small sample in New York.
a great
we
point.
can't make that obligation.
And they're trying to pick it apart as the savings is eliminating the administrative end of the insurance industry, or the claims adjustment end, or the claims review end. And it's still going to happen. But now it just gets a government bureaucrat. So bureaucracy is going to do it. Yeah, I went to the Nursing Association in New York, and they're big proponents of it. They think for some reason if the government starts to run, and they also complain about nursing working hours and how much they have to work, and the greedy hospitals that make them work too much and do this and do that. And I'm thinking, do you want the government as your boss? Do you think that and they're pushing down on you to provide? You think that the private sector is pushing down on you to provide more health care than wait until the government gets a hold of you.
Well, that's a good point. And I can tell you some. I mean, I staffing ratios for nurses, I think, is good for patients and everybody
Absolutely,
else too.
right.
So I get that. I've had a good relationship with even the New York State Nurses Association, and they participate in some of these public hearings, and I've asked them about the same question about if you lose these health insurance benefits. Some of the answers I get back is, well, we're not guaranteed that the savings will be passed into our raises because, quite frankly, some of these workers gave up potential raises to have these benefits.
Right.
I said, what happens to those raises? Well, now we won't have to focus on negotiating for health insurance, so it'll give us more time to negotiate for raises. To me, okay, that could be their answer, but I think people would like a guarantee that money is going to be stuck in their pocket. I don't trust the government to do that.
You know what? They're absolutely out of their minds nuts if you want the government to be your employer.
That's all
it is. It's just
every
like you
time
got.
I hear somebody from the government say, if we do this, we're going to be eliminating this overhead that you've been paying on the other side.
They're not.
And it reminds me, and you'll remember this, when when the banks first introduced the ATM,
Yeah.
they were free because it was going to save them the money on
On the
tellers.
tellers.
Now, they still haven't had any tellers. They still haven't added any tellers. But now they're charging, $5 every time you want to withdraw the money. I mean, it doesn't work. They're
I'd
not
rather
saying,
give it to a teller and get a smile back.
right, but I'm just saying, but
I'll say hello.
it's a con to lure you in. Oh, we're going to save you on this, but they're not because they get you, and then once you're in, then they zap
Well,
you.
look, it's very scary out there if you take a look. And New York is extremely so. With the bail reform coming in January.
my gosh, yeah.
With the idea that if I was the Met management, I'd be really a little annoyed that they're going to give all the guys out on bail Met free tickets.
Oh my gosh, I didn't hear about that.
But the Yankees, they're not giving out Yankee tickets.
Wait a
yet.
second, but those felons are all potential Democrat voters. I mean, ask Dominic.
There's a proposal to have inmates now be voting in prison.
Yes, I saw
including-
that.
I mean, they're pushing it, and that bail reform. This is one of my pet peeves. If we want to have a debate on the Assembly and the Senate floor about criminal justice reform, I'm game. You know what? I'm sure that the system is imperfect, and we can do things to make it better. But if you want to talk about criminal justice reform, that doesn't belong in a budget deal that was passed at 3 o'clock in the morning
Right.
when everybody else was fast asleep. And now we're at a point where the discovery law changes that are going to be crippling DA's offices with another unfunded mandate, and these bail reforms. We even had the progressive attorney general, Tish James, said we have to go back and take another look at this. If she's even saying that, it went too far.
How bad is it when a police commissioner runs away from the job? Because you're a police commissioner. I mean, and I'm out of here before this hits because there's no upside for me being the boss.
You know what it is? It's like a Halloween movie. They disarm the public, take away their guns. Leave the guns in all the wrong hands, and then open up the jails. Wait, what's that movie? The Purge or something?
No, that was Escape from New York, wasn't it?
I don't know, but it's like
Kurt Russell. Yeah, when Kurt Russell was that Escape from New York.
It's upside down. It's absolutely upside down. And the problem is they cloak every one of these things in terms with the racial cloak. Is what they do and look, I understand. That the people that can't afford bail are your lower socioeconomic strata, and you know what? Some people shouldn't be held on bail. They shouldn't be. But to take it away from the discretion of the judge, who has the person in front of them and the circumstances and the ability for the ability for the person to promise to show up or everything else. That's wrong. It's just wrong to do this kind of blanket thing. New York is, and this is where New York is getting to be very scary because we worry about what happens on the national politics level, but you have these little microcosms that try it out. It's California and New York. You know what?
Yeah, but this is what kills me.
Albany knows best mentality.
This is what kills me. Westchester County said we're a sanctuary state. County. And then said, we're going to raise your sales tax. And people still ran to the polls and voted Democrat.
All right, so I get an interview, and somebody says, you take some controversial stance. One on abortion, and everybody says, it's not a county issue.
Right.
But IPA, the Immigration Protection Act, which was basically passed to stop cooperation between local law enforcement and ICE, which was an Obama administration policy put in called Safer Communities. Look it up. So the guy's asking me, what's that all about? And I'm saying, well, tell me what was the purpose of the IPA to begin with? Well, it was so that the county wasn't doing the federal government's job. I said, well, it's not you have somebody in custody. You should look up on a database. If the guy's wanted on a federal warrant, you hold him until the federal government comes. Why wouldn't you cooperate with the federal law enforcement? Isn't that we're all in law enforcement? Then you swear to uphold the. Well. So what's the purpose of it? Not to cooperate with the federal government. What's the purpose of not cooperating with the federal government? The whole thing was it was passed for virtue signaling, so that they could say, we're good guys, and anybody that opposes it is a racist and a bad guy. That's all, because it had no practical purpose to it whatsoever.
But then you go back to 9/11. What was the main cause the 9/11 Commission said was the reason why 9/11 happened? Because the law enforcement would not cooperate. They built up this wall.
That's a great. You know what? Information sharing, intelligence sharing with the law enforcement agencies is absolutely critical. When I used to work for a member of Congress, Nan Hayworth. I interned for Sue Kelly. We were talking about that before when I was in college. But I was blessed to develop some really good. Yeah, I'm out of college. Thank you.
You're over 21?
Yeah, almost 35 now. But I developed a lot of really good relationships. One of my life mentors was James O'Neill, who used to be involved with the SHIELDS and the Fraternal Order of Police, was head of security at one point with Rudy Giuliani. And I learned a lot of really big, important things from him. And information sharing, intelligence sharing is absolutely critical. And you don't want to limit cooperation or collaboration with other law enforcement. You should be doing the opposite. You should be encouraging it. And if ICE issues a detainer, you should be communicating with them. That's absolutely critical. Anything that limits communication and cooperation with law enforcement is bad for public safety.
And it compromises public safety. You know whose public safety compromises most? Is the Latino community, or where you're releasing these people back into, and so it's like you're hurting the very people you're being self-righteous to protect.
It's almost like the opposite with the gerrymandering. You think you're protecting them, and it's actually
okay. Before we go, we got 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes
here.
Yeah,
2 minutes left.
We were talking off the air about nuisance phone calls.
Yes.
And New York State, even though there's a reason, because it's in the news and it's. I follow social media.
Phone
you
calls
don't.
A nuisance.
I know, but New York State actually enacted something. It may not be panacea, but it's another step in curtailing the nuisance calls. What is it?
Sure. So the Nuisance Call Act, and you know what, we talk about a lot of different ideological gaps. One of the things in the minority I'm privileged to work on is try to find areas of common ground. And a colleague of mine from Westchester County, I believe it was Amy Paulin, introduced the bill. And it passed the Assembly and the Senate. It's the Nuisance Call Act. One of the things it does is it just puts greater restrictions on our telephone companies and telemarketers to prevent them from sharing information, selling information without complicit consent from you. And it's something that we've seen a huge rise in with spoof calls. Now, if someone is scamming you, they're not following the law anyway. So that's not going to solve all those problems. But you know what? I think it's important to show folks that we are taking measurable steps to improve it. I used to be the ranking of the member of the Aging Committee in Assembly my first term, and this is one of the biggest things I heard about from particularly our seniors, because they're victimized constantly with those scary phone calls that, hey, your grandson's in jail, you got to wire me money. So those things could still happen, and there's a bunch of safety tips from the Attorney General's office that I would certainly promote and share with folks. But this will at least hope the pesky marketers from calling you constantly.
So I wanted to end with this because we've been talking for the last half hour about the stuff that, the polarization. But here was something that they actually all agreed on, because they all are victims of it.
Right.
I don't care what party you are. I don't care.
Everybody gets
it was an annoyance that affected, and it actually brought them together to say, okay, is there anything we could do that, even though it doesn't solve all the problems, but does move the ball? It does move the ball. You don't agree?
Oh, I don't know.
So-
You know what? You know what? If they stay on the light stuff, they do less damage.
Yeah, that's
When are you
That's
running?
true.
When are you running again?
Next year.
Started now.
I
Wait,
never
wait, wait.
stop.
Wait,
I'm always up.
Wait. So then you're actually running in a presidential election.
Yeah.
I am, but I ran that presidential election my first time, 2016.
yeah.
That was with